A lot of NFL to get into. I saw this, too, that the NFL is changing its divisional playoff games, cutting back Super Bowl ad breaks, eliminating single headers. We'll get into that as well as some stuff with the Cowboys, Dak Prescott and the Cowboys. News there. Antonio Brown in Oakland. Who would have predicted that there might have been a problem right off the bat? Into that and more. Day 2, Eagles OTAs. John McMullen at JF McMullen joins us now for Football at 4 right here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. Johnny Mac, welcome back. How you been, man?
Good. How are you, Mike?
All is well. Do you have a preference between Manco and Tony's Baltimore Grill?
I do not. Shockingly, I'm not a big pizza guy.
What?
So, because I'm not really a big pizza guy, which shocks a lot of people because of overweight. But, never. It's not on the first of any of my lists. So
interesting.
I'm not really partial to any.
All right. Well, we there was the Barstool did the pizza reviews of those two places. They were the two pizza places that he was in town this week, I guess, and reviewed them both. And one got a much higher score than the other, which was pretty surprising, the disparity in the score. I thought maybe you could have settled the score.
No, I can't settle it. But I did see somebody, and I forget, and I wish I could credit them. And I do find this interesting because it makes a lot of sense. If you're on the beach and it's a hot day and it's 85 degrees, why do you want pizza anyway? You should be getting...
Well, keep in mind, the place is open at night, too, when you're not on the beach. I saw that. That's Kevin Kincaid, a fine WVU grad, by the way. But his remark there, fine, if you're in the daytime, but if you're walking the boards at night, you get a slice of pizza.
All right, that's true. All right, I'll give you that. See, everybody's open in my mind today. That doesn't usually happen.
All right, let's dive into a couple things. Number one, this story that you wrote at 973ESPN.com. I saw this report and tweet, and I was almost laughing at it. But as you write, does a TV analyst really have a say in the future of Joe Douglas?
Yeah, I'll tell you what. I saw it was Manish Mehta from the New York Daily News, and I saw the tweet. You know how people are on Twitter. I had to check to see if it was real because I laughed at it.
Same thing.
Well.
I was like, is this a joke?
Yeah, and I thought it was a fake person with a fake report because people who have too much time seemingly do that far too often. But no, it was real. And Peter Schrager's evidently good friends with Christopher Johnson. He's taken over for Woody Johnson as essentially the owner of the Jets. And he might have a say on who the general manager is, which is, and I wrote on, as you mentioned, in 973ESPN.com, hey, that would have me running for the hills from a personal standpoint. But I did talk to somebody around the Jets, and they said Peter Schrager likes Joe Douglas a lot, has a lot of respect for the way the Eagles do business. So it might actually help them. So it remains a very interesting decision if Joe Douglas wants to get involved with that organization because they are a bit of a laughing stock, let's be honest. So you have to weigh, do you want to get involved with that type of organization? And I think that has a lot to do with personality. Some people would like to tackle that and turn the reputation of the organization around, and some other people would like to do what I said, and that's run away.
Yeah, and we had broached this conversation before about like, hey, if the Jets offer you the job, but you're afraid of the culture and what's going on there, and you in your heart of hearts believe, and it's like a college kid who's asking, hey, am I going to get drafted? He knows that there's another job for him down the line, but do you just take the first one that comes to you, even if it's not a great environment?
Well, when you get drafted, you don't have an option, and sometimes you go to a bad organization.
Right, but there are some guys
is.
who are not sure where they're going to go, and they get advised of whether or not if I leave early, would that be a good decision or not?
Yeah, I mean, some try to finagle the system. Eli Manning did it in a big way. If you remember going back to that draft and Phillip Rivers in San Diego versus New York, but it doesn't happen that often for players, I don't think, unless you're near the top of the draft and maybe you can steer things a little bit. For executives, it's kind of different, but a lot of GMs or a lot of potential GMs are only going to get one shot. And we talk about it all the time, coaches as well. There's only 32 of these jobs. Mm-hmm. It's pretty competitive. So you do risk something if you turn an organization down. I think a lot of people assume Joe will have other options. I've said it. I think he will. But there's no guarantee of that. If the Eagles, for instance, we've talked a lot about the Eagles and the roster right now and how good it looks on paper. There's a lot of expectations on this team. If they fail to meet those expectations, well, guess what? Everybody's reputation takes a hit, from Howie Roseman on down to Doug Peterson to Joe Douglas. And maybe those options that seem there today aren't there later down the line. So that's the kind of stuff you have to weigh.
All right, John, let's look at some of the things that happened today. Nate Sudfeld, he said he was a late bloomer, and it seems, at least in your mind, that he has a clear leg up against Cody Kessler in that job.
Yeah, for a number of reasons. One, he's been here, so the Eagles are comfortable. He knows the system. He knows the coaching staff. He's Doug's type of quarterback. He's a big, long, lengthy guy, 6'6", similar to Carson and Nick Foles, whereas Cody's a 6'1", a smaller quarterback. It's just not the template Doug prefers. And then the arm strength. Not that Nate is Brett Favre in his prime, but you could see yesterday it was pretty significant difference in arm strength between him and Cody Kessler. So obviously it's very early. We don't even need to put that caveat on there, but it's clear the Eagles want him to win the job, but they didn't want to hand it to him. And I think that's a good way to do business. I don't think you should hand things to any unproven players. You should try to bring in competition. The Eagles were able to do that with a guy who's at least started in this league. And now it's up to Nate. Everything is sort of in his corner. It's his job. He would have to lose it. And I don't think he's going to lose it, but there's that opportunity. If Cody plays well over the summer, he could push him.
Mm-hmm. Donnell Pumphrey, you made it, you talked about him the other day. We joked that he's the new Mr. Lehigh. Does this OTA give him any opportunity to, do you think he's a long shot to make the team?
Yeah, he's a very long shot to make the team. There's not a lot of room, and it's not just running back. We've talked about that a lot as well. This is a very deep team. There's not a lot of spots for young, unproven players. And if you look at running back, Jordan Howard is here. Miles Sanders is here. Corey Clement is back from injury. And then you start talking about everybody wants to write off Wendell Smallwood. He's still here. You have guys like Boston Scott, who was picked up from New Orleans and on the practice squad, got on the roster at the end of last year, was ahead of Donnell. So he's looking up at a lot of bodies. Josh Adams as well, who's still recovering from shoulder surgery, but was able to do some individual work at practice. He's looking up at a lot of guys, and a lot of things, a lot of dominoes would have to fall for him to make this football team. And the first domino is he's got to prove, I don't care what he does in the spring. He always looks great in the spring. when there's no pads on. He's quick. He's able to do what he's good at. He's tremendous in space. But when the pads go on, he's got to prove he can handle the contact, and he's got to prove that he has what coaches call functional football strength. To this point, he's not proven that.
All right, John, how about J.J. Arcega-Whiteside? We always like to hear about the rookies getting some work in the slot, which, he's a bigger body guy. A lot of people have compared him to Alshon Jeffrey, so to see a big guy like that in the slot, is that an area where they think maybe his rookie season that he can get on the field?
Well, I don't see same thing what I just talked about with the running backs. There's not going to be a lot of room because you have to get playing time for Alshon Jeffrey and Deshaun Jackson, Nelson Aguilar. And JJ would be fourth in that mix. Generally, the fourth receiver, you're going to get some time compared to Jordan Matthews last year. But you're going to be in that range, maybe 20 snaps a game. And if you notice the way Jordan got to play last year, I think that's his role as a rookie. And it's going to be similar. And that means you do have to play outside and inside. Because you're going to be spelling different people at different times. And I thought you saw the first indication that the Eagles are trying to ramp up Arcega-Whiteside. He can play outside the numbers. Now you got to get him in tune on at least playing in the slot on occasion, and that's what they're trying to do.
John McMullen at JF McMullen for more on the Eagles OTAs. You mentioned Dallas Goedert yesterday. You say he's trending way up. He looks like a starter on most teams, but as we, broached the conversation yesterday, how are they going to figure out? I guess, this is the start of saying, man, this guy really looks good. We have 4 months to figure out how we're going to get him more involved.
Yeah, it's going to be a problem. And I've said it a lot, it's a good problem, but it is going to be a problem because he is really good. And I don't know if Doug likes or feels comfortable running a two tight end heavy offense. And by that, I mean, they're already two tight end heavy compared to most teams. But when you start talking about 50-50 with 11 personnel versus 12 personnel, basically nobody in this league does that, with the possible exception, New England back in the day when they had Gronkowski and Hernandez, Baltimore because they ran the football so much. It's very rare. You see it on occasion, but it's generally for a reason. In the case of the Ravens, it's because they couldn't throw the ball and they had to run it. In the case of the Patriots, we had maybe the best tight end of all time, and a second tight end who was phenomenal himself before he went off the rails from a personal standpoint. The Eagles would be more like just having two really, really good tight ends, and you have to weigh that versus playing three receivers. And then the coach's philosophy enters into it. And the coach's philosophy is he wants three receivers on the field. He wants to spread things out more. So it is going to be interesting. I would say that Dallas Goedert is going to be one of the Eagles' best players when you talk about receivers, and I'm throwing everybody into that stew, the wide receivers and the tight ends. So if you group them all together, I think he's going to be one of their four best. And you should have him on the field, but I'm not sure that's going to happen.
Interesting situation there with a lot of and you asked yesterday Doug Peterson about how you handle all of these personalities. He'll get an opportunity to show us this year with a lot of talent. How about on the offensive line where you tweeted today at JF McMullen, Vaitai got reps for Brooks, seemingly is at right guard. Wisniewski started as Kelsey's backup at center before he got some right guard work. Matt Pryor, someone who, a lot of people said, hey, they really like this Pryor guy, and many people think Vaitai could be somebody traded, but are they more tied, do they like Vaitai versus, are they finding out if Vaitai has versatility, it seems like, in an effort to possibly keep him around because they do trust him.
Well, I think part of it is that, and part of it is if you increase the versatility, it increases his trade value as well. And perhaps, we always generally see a Howie Roseman trade in August, and this is a guy who, at one time traded Matt Tobin. So he could certainly trade Halapoulivaati Vaitai, who, for all the criticism he gets, I say all the time, by definition, he has proven good enough to win a Super Bowl with at left tackle.
Right.
So there is a lot. We talk about it all the time, Mike. There's a lot of bad offensive lines in this league, and they could use some help. And to have a guy who's done that and played at a high level and at least an acceptable level in big games, that could be valuable. And that could be what the Eagles are trying to do, increase that value. But I do think it certainly was a surprise, I will say that, to most of us, that Vaitai started at right guard, Mailata at right tackle, and Matt Pryor wasn't out there. Because I think the assumption was we all knew Brandon Brooks wouldn't be ready, and the assumption was Matt Pryor would fill in, and if it wasn't going to be Matt Pryor, it would be Wiz. It turned out to be Big B.
I'm interested, Joe Osman, you mentioned him a lot. He got Chris Long's locker and apparently stole his reps too.
Well, Early, I mean, remember, Derek Barnett was not he did a little work in individual, but he was not in team drill, so that meant Vinnie Curry started at right end. So you have that. And then the second team ends were Joe Osman and Josh Sweat. And Josh Sweat was on the right side. Osman was on the left side, which is typically where Chris played. So it's very early. He did get his locker. You've constantly heard Howie Roseman talk about him. Doug Peterson has talked about him. So the Eagles do like him. But once Barnett is back, that puts Vinny into that rotational defensive end role, and that knocks everybody down a peg. So there's still work to do, but there's no question the Eagles are very excited about the potential of Joe Osman.
Let's get to Avonte Maddox. You say he's just a natural cover corner. Could he be one of those guys that, fourth rounder, and a couple of years from now we're talking about one of the, I don't want to say one of the best, perennial Pro Bowlers, but that, hey, you found the steal with this guy who is just that shutdown cover corner. Are you starting to see a guy that could be in that mold?
I don't want to go that far because the size, and that's what I tweeted, it is what it is. I mean, it doesn't matter how good he is. And as I said, he's just a tremendous natural cover corner. There are going to be guys that are just too big for him. And Julio Joneses of the world, Mike Evans, yesterday in practice, he got matched up in the slot with Dallas Goedert. Dallas ate his lunch because he's so big. He just used his body. So that part of it limits his effectiveness, and that's why he's in the slot, because he can hide that size a little bit. And I've told everybody for months he was going to be the starting slot corner. There he was, the starting slot corner. I think that's his role. But I don't think he projects to be a 16-game starter on the outside. There's too many big receivers in this league.
L.J. Fort mixed in with the first team. You tweet that out at linebacker. He's calling the defense. Is he a guy that maybe our listeners aren't aware of who he is or what he could provide?
Yeah, I mean, he was last year in Pittsburgh a turned into a pretty good coverage linebacker. So that's what the Eagles saw. That's what they wanted. That's what this league is. I think now we can officially turn the page from that old school mentality of how we label starters 4-3, 3 linebackers. The Eagles don't even mix it. Their first team defense, the entire practice was nickel, the entire practice. So only 2 linebackers are on the field. started with Camus, Grugier, Hill, Nate Gary, but then LJ mixed in. He's better than both of those guys. So I think it's going to be Nigel Bradham and it's going to be LJ Ford are going to be your two coverage linebackers, barring injury.
Yeah, you mentioned, are they a 3-4 or a 4-3? You're saying that's kind of out the window. They're a four-man front, though, but the back end is, just undefined, I guess, at this point.
Well, they like to play. Jim Schwartz has talked about this a lot. They like to have two linebackers on the field. Now, at times in the past, when Jordan Hicks was injured and unable to go, you had essentially Malcolm Jenkins playing a linebacker in a dime defense. So they have some versatility because of Malcolm's skill set. But obviously Malcolm is not at voluntary work right now. The goal is, though, to get those two linebackers on the field. But to get them on the field, they both have to be able to cover.
By the way, a couple quick NFL notes. The NFL has officially awarded the 2021 draft to Cleveland, and the 2023 draft will be in Kansas City. We know next year's draft will be in Las Vegas, yet no word on the 2022 draft. Denver, Detroit, Green Bay, Minnesota, and Houston are among the hosts for 2020. No Philadelphia for the at least upcoming drafts. Cleveland, Kansas City will be 2021 and 2023. There is no 2022 yet. Kansas City couldn't get it for 2022 because they're getting a major renovation to their airport, so they decided to do 2023 instead. And, John, we also know that some significant changes are coming to the broadcasting. Is no more single-header rules, so you'll get 3 games a week, and they're going to alter the start times of games during the divisional playoffs, which is a big change. They've previously been 1 o'clock and 4 o'clock. Those are going to be 3 and 6:30s now. So that's a little bit different. And they're also going to be doing some changes to the number of commercials during the Super Bowl. But those time changes for the divisional rounds and stuff, it seems that the NFL is trying to make some tweaks to get those ratings changes because we're all feeling the ratings crunch, I guess.
Yeah, well, to be honest, it has nothing to do with the ratings. I mean, the NFL still remains the ratings king and the only really DVR-proof television vehicle left, really. And this is all TV related. And anybody who follows me on Twitter, I broke the story with AEW Wrestling and their TV deal. And I said during that, the most powerful people in sports, everybody says if you ask them that question, you'll hear names like Roger Goodell or Adam Silver. They're not. The most powerful people in sports are the television executives that write these checks for these rights fees. And that's what the TV partners want because the NFL is the only thing they can count on. So they want to push divisional weekend back so you can get more of a prime time live with that second game. They want the less commercials but the longer to keep viewers engaged and actually watching commercials. So it's all television related. And those are the guys, as I said, who are the most powerful people in sports. And what they want, they get.
That's right.
Because you talk about the NFL, and I say this all the time, it's approaching a $15 billion industry. Half of that comes from TV rights fees. So you could imagine it would never happen because of the value. But if the TV execs got together and said, we can't afford this, this is no longer worth it, it would cut this industry in half overnight. And, oh, by the way, if you don't have that television exposure, the rest of the industry, the rest of the revenue generated would go down. So on paper, it's half, but essentially it would cripple the entire industry.
No doubt.
And that's the NFL.
You would essentially be a bigger version of the AAF.
Yeah. And that is the most powerful sports brand in the world would be crippled. So you can imagine what that means for other sports.
John McMullen, Football at 4 every day right here on the Sports Bash. Follow him at JF McMullen and follow out the Eagles OTAs. We'll have more news on them tomorrow right here on the Sports Bash live on 97.3 ESPN. All right, John, take care, pal.
All right, thanks, Mike.